Hi, I'm Greg Gutfeld, in for Bill O'Reilly, who is on vacation. Thanks for watching this Factor special. So, if you like your cave, you can keep your cave.
That strike delivering that nearly 22,000 pounds of ordnance, hammering in that system of tunnels and caves, supporting ISIS transport in eastern Afghanistan.
It was the blast felt round the world, the mother of all bombs. At least that's what the media keeps calling it. Is that evidence of gender bias? I know that I'm offended. But what's more offensive to so many liberal media types is that it's a bomb. A big bomb in a time of war. The size and scope, now the subject of so much concern.
The blast heard round the world. The biggest conventional bomb the U.S. has ever used.
The U.S. military pulled out the big guns in the fight against ISIS today. A 21,000-pound bomb, the largest non-nuclear weapon the United States has ever used.
Afghan witnesses living in villages miles away from where this bomb was dropped said they could feel the earth shake when it detonated. It's a devastating weapon called a massive ordnance air blast, but its nickname, the mother of all bombs. At 22,000 pounds, it is the largest non-nuclear bomb the U.S. has ever dropped in combat.
Wow. Just a point of fact, you know what a non-nuclear bomb is? It's a bomb. And so predictably, the media and celebrities freak out over a strategy that addresses the world beyond hashtag slogans on Twitter or sappy essays on how to understand the enemy. George Takei, you remember him? Former Star Trek actor and now online scold. He tweets this: "Dropping bigger bombs doesn't make you a bigger man, Donald." Well, thanks, George. Your hot take has the depth of a farewell scribble on a high school yearbook. But we get it. The bomb's pretty big, but sometimes you have to use big things to stop bad things. And it was used to pulverize an area where ISIS lives and breathes. It killed 36 dirtbags. And yes, it probably cost us, but in money, not life or limb. That's what we call, in scientific terms, a bargain. Which brings us to Joey Jones. During his last deployment to Afghanistan, Jones disarmed and destroyed more than 80 improvised explosive devices. In August 2010, he stepped on an IED, losing both legs above the knee. After the bomb was dropped in eastern Afghanistan on Thursday, he tweeted this: "I lost my legs because my government was afraid to use the tools they had and saw me as expendable. I wish I had this administration." That's pretty strong stuff. His point? Bombs like this clear places that used to take lives and limbs of those who had that job before. So using this tool is quite a shift. So we in the media, we're put off by big bangs. But the bigger they are, the less likely we lose or injure heroes like Jones. And it also sends a message that we not only have the tools, but we will use them. It's a message heard not just by ISIS, but by North Korea. Remember, tomorrow is the founder of North Korea's birthday. When their leaders usually try to show off with their own brand of fireworks, it's pretty exciting. America beat them to it with a preemptive strike to rattle the cage of a fiend who loves to rattle ours. Done with just one bomb in eastern Afghanistan. That's what I call multitasking. So joining us now from Atlanta to react, the aforementioned Joey Jones. Joey, first of all, as always, thank you for your service and for your sacrifice. I have to ask you, you tweeted this quickly. Why were you so compelled to get your opinion out there so soon?
Well, thanks for having me on, Greg. This is an issue that's really important to me. I lost my legs in Afghanistan in 2010, and I don't sit around and make second wishes or want to change things. I lost friends that day as well. But the reason that happened is we went into a ghost town to clear it of IEDs, a town that we were wanting to take so we could neutralize all the IEDs stockpiled there. Much like these caves, all the bad things stockpiled there. We gave people warning we were coming. it was a ghost town by the time we got there, but they also turned it into a minefield because they knew we were coming. So there was no risk of civilian casualty, or very little risk of civilian casualty. And as NeoD-Tech, we got to make recommendations on how to clear this piece of property or this town and get rid of these threats. And one of those recommendations was to use ordnance or a bomb and just wipe it off the face of the earth. No one's living there. There's nothing but bad things there. But the headline in the newspapers that could have read, "Dropped bombs in Afghanistan," that political collateral wasn't worth it. But you know, that's how we felt in 2010. That's how I felt for a long time. When I saw this headline and read more about it and understood that the commanders were given the opportunity to use a bomb instead of sending more Green Beret in there to die like a few days ago, that was an amazing thing to me. That's a change in procedure, and it's something that I feel like we should recognize.
No, and I think it was an excellent point. I didn't conceive of your point until I read it, and I just said, wow. That's common sense. Yeah. The idea that you just clear the place. Why are we using our own human life, our own troops, to walk into these danger zones when you can just drop something and clear it out? I don't know. How have your fellow veterans reacted, say, to the bomb, and maybe perhaps to your reaction? Was everybody in agreement? Was there some conflict?
Well, you know, in today's Twitter, anytime you tweet something out that's pro-Trump, there's a group of people that will rise up and celebrate that, and there's a group of people that will rise up and condemn it. I did have an interaction on Twitter with one veteran who lost his legs in Afghanistan as well, and he really took, I guess, objection with the idea that I was contributing this to the change in rules of engagement. It's not necessarily a change in rules of engagement. It's a change in perspective. It's a change of intent from our commander-in-chief. What's more important, our lives and the mission at hand, or how it's perceived in the world? You know, everyone's talking about the messages that the Moab sent, and as a statement bomb, which that's what I'm calling it because it did make a statement, I think the most important message it sent was to the troops on the ground fighting and the generals and colonels commanding. It's letting them know that when they have to make a tough choice or a strategic choice, they now have that ability. And the troops know that if they have an opportunity to accomplish the mission without putting their necks on the line every single day to protect themselves and their brothers and sisters, that's now an option. And that's why I celebrate it. That's why I put it out there.
Do you think that President Obama understood your perspective at the time? I mean, you're making perfect sense that a weaponry of this magnitude can minimize our own troop casualty and suffering. I can't believe he thought, you know, I don't want to risk that. But did he just miss the boat?
Well, you know, I had dinner with President Obama in the White House. He was incredibly gracious. Most of the combatant commanders were there. He asked me, hypothetically, if I were back in Afghanistan right now, what would I do, meaning back where I was at? And my initial thought was to say I'd step left.
Yes.
And when I stepped right, it didn't work out well. But you know, I told him where I was at and what I was doing made a huge difference. I can't speak to the rest of the country. I don't have his perspective. He didn't necessarily have mine. I hate critiquing a man who's done 8 years on the job and he's gone. I know that how I felt in 2010 was unsupported, and I believe from the feedback and what I know that the Marines serving now, or the service members serving now, feel supported in a different way.
Well, thank you, Joey. Thanks again for your service, and I hope to talk to you soon. I'm glad you ditched the bow tie. You look so much better in a regular long tie. But that's just me. All right, let's turn.
I did it because of you.
I know. Let's turn to Richard Goodstein, Democratic strategist. Richard, you just heard Joey slam the previous administration, not so much, but kind of slam for not using a bomb like this. Do you think he has a point? I know you're now the bad guy in this.
First of all, none of us can even think about putting ourselves in Joey's position, right? Nobody, you'd have to think bad thoughts of whoever was in charge if that's how you came out of the war. So obviously, hats off to him. We owe him a big debt. The fact of the matter is, there were more people, though, who lost their limbs and who died in Afghanistan, in Iraq, when George Bush was president, who presumably wasn't as tethered as Barack Obama was. So somehow or other, it's not a function of what Obama did or do. Incidentally, the facts are, it was under President Obama that this mother of all bombs got deployed into the area, and then it was up to General Nicholson to decide where and when to use it. So the suggestion that somehow even Donald Trump couldn't lie about this one when he was asked was this your decision? Even he knew better than to lie, because the general would have basically countered him.
Richard, they moved the bomb. That doesn't count. It wasn't used. We know President Obama dithered. That was always the problem. He had a problem dealing with the military, let's face it, and the military had a problem dealing with him. Yeah. Or else he would have done what Joey would have asked, right?
Well, the fact is, again, when you have General Nicholson on your air, ask him why he did it the other day and not several months ago. But with all due respect to Joey, we've heard his prescription before, which is we need to destroy the town to save it. That was one of the things we came out of Vietnam with, right? And we saw how well that worked. Look, we can't go door to door. We're not going to kill enough ISIS with bombs or weapons. It's just the collateral damage, though, that we do. Look, we killed 36
There was no collateral.
ISIS.
No collateral, no civilian casualties here.
Well, we killed 36 ISIS.
That's collateral?
We killed 18 friendly Syrian freedom fighters the day before. Right. And I bet as a percentage, that was a bigger percent of the Syrian freedom fighters than the 36 were of ISIS. So that's taking one step forward and two back. That's not the way to win a war.
Well, you have to take step forwards. And I would say killing, 36 ISIS fighters.
I'm all for it.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. I think that was great. Incidentally, actors don't speak for the Democratic Party. Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi do, and they said this was a proportional use of firepower. Great. So there should be no question among your audience whether Democrats are for or against this. I think this was wise. But again, thank you, General Nicholson. Had nothing to do with anything that Donald Trump said or did.
Well, the greater truth is, in the last week, Donald Trump drew a red line, Obama drew a red line, and then retreated.
Well, again, we'll see what what is the policy in Syria? If you know, incidentally, we know what it was when he was running, which was stay out. When he was tweeting, it was don't bomb. Now it's bomb. Incidentally, this is project, kind of pothole, right? That's what we did on that runway. Look, we'll see a few months from now. Let's talk again, Greg, and see whether Donald Trump really had a strategy that got us anywhere.
We'll be talking about that. I'm sure we will. Thank you, Richard. A pleasure. Next on the rundown, the standoff over North Korea and its nuclear program. At a boiling point, can a military conflict be avoided? Back with that in a moment.
Live from America's News headquarters, I'm Trace Gallagher. A manhunt for a missing fugitive in Wisconsin is over. Joseph Jacob Baskey was on the run for 10 days after stealing an arsenal of weapons from a gun store. Police say he also mailed a manifesto to President Trump. He was found early this morning asleep on someone's property. Watch.
This is a Good Friday in more than one way. We would like to report that the fugitive that has been sought in a nationwide manhunt for the last week and a half, Joseph Jabakowski, has been apprehended. Last night at about 7:10 p.m., the Vernon County Sheriff's Office received a call from a resident reporting that someone was trespassing on their property and sleeping in a makeshift tent.
A jury acquitted former New England Patriots tight end Aaron Hernandez in the shooting deaths of two men in 2012. The verdict comes 2 years to the day after the former NFL star was convicted in another killing. The 27-year-old is serving a life sentence for that conviction. Protests planned tomorrow in several cities to demand President Trump release his most recent tax returns. Polls suggest 74% of Americans want him to release them. The White House has not said if there is any intention for the president to comply. I'm Trace Gallagher. Now back to the O'Reilly Factor.
In the Impact segment tonight, the standoff with North Korea. The United States is bracing for a possible nuclear test by the rogue state. And military tensions are escalating to dangerous levels. Joining us now from D.C. with the latest, our own rogue Fox News chief Washington correspondent, James Rosen. So, James, are we about to go to war with Captain Crazy Pants, who I'm referring to, obviously, the punky pantsuit in North Korea?
Likely not.
No?
But what we're seeing really is the Trump administration trying to send a message to North Korea and also to its patron state in China that business as usual can't go on like this any longer. They've been testing nuclear devices for over 10 years in North Korea. Some 2 million people have starved to death in that country to fund this program. And they have this extraordinary ballistic missile inventory which they keep testing. And our allies in that region, Japan, South Korea, others, are very anxious about it. But I think that President Trump and his national security team know very well that unilateral U.S. military action against some facilities in North Korea or anywhere on North Korean soil would present a very different case for retaliation from the target than we saw from Syria, where the retaliation was zero. They would probably escalate this very swiftly in North Korea and put at danger potentially tens of thousands of citizens in Seoul, South Korea.
Is it just me thinking that it's suddenly heating up, or is this some kind of ritual that happens with every new president, that North Korea just pops up within 3 to 6 months? But it feels like, for some reason, this is hotter.
It is, because North Korea's progress on the nuclear path has been slow but steady. And it's already considered that they potentially have the ability to outfit a missile, a medium-range ballistic missile, with a nuclear warhead that could potentially strike Japan or South Korea, and that they're working on longer-range ballistic missiles and being able to miniaturize the nuclear warhead so that they could strike the continental United States. This is not sci-fi scenario stuff. They have been making steady progress, and so it is hotter now for that reason. But there's been a policy review underway in the Trump administration, and according to published reports, that review basically comes down on the side of saying, let's try to pressure North Korea more and get China more involved in doing that, but no engagement with that regime right now, and no military option either.
You know, I keep thinking, where is Dennis Rodman? Here's a guy who knows Donald Trump from Celebrity Apprentice, and also visited North Korea and chummed it up with the portly nutbag. Seems like maybe he could be the bridge.
Yeah, this is the kind of creative diplomacy that people at the State Department have recognized that Greg Gutfeld exhibits for years now.
Yes.
Here's my solution,
right,
honestly, to keep it quick. It has to be regime change.
Right.
And so an obese young man known for an unhealthy lifestyle and subjected to great stress of leadership, one day fails to awaken in his bed, and before most North Koreans can even absorb that news, a new ruler who has no ties to the Kim family, but who has all the right impeccable credentials with the North Korean military and the Communist Party, is effectively installed after having been vetted properly by the Chinese government. And he promises to carry on the good and glorious work of the Kim family, but while improving the lives of ordinary North Koreans. And eventually the Chinese come and visit that ruler. Legitimacy is conferred on the regime thereby. And slowly, after what we would call a decent interval, this regime starts to make liberalize the market and the political freedoms in that country, and start to make moves to join the world economy again, sort of the way China did it in the 1970s.
That's a long list of dreams. I wish that would be the case, but I don't know. We haven't seen it for decades. All right, James, thank you so much. We now go to
Greg.
Former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, John Bolton, for his take on where we go from here. He joins us from Washington. It's good to see you, Ambassador. What is your take on the events, and what advice would you give the administration?
Well, I don't think a strategy that relies on pressuring North Korea to give up its nuclear weapons is going to work. Look, we've tried for 25 years across Republican and Democratic administrations to persuade the North Koreans to give up their quest for nuclear weapons. We've tried persuasion, it's failed. We've tried coercion, it's failed. Because the fact is, this regime is never voluntarily going to give up nuclear weapons. They're the ace in the hole. This is the regime's insurance of its long-term viability. And a simple pressure, they've resisted. And beyond that, the only country that can put effective pressure on them is China, which understands very well how fragile this regime is. And China fears if it puts too much pressure on, the regime will collapse. That's actually what our objective should be. And what we need to do is explain to China that it's in their interest, despite years of policy to the contrary, it's in their interest to see North and South Korea reunited in a sensible way. That would end the North Korean nuclear weapons program, and in my view, that's the only way it's going to happen.
Are you optimistic at all about this? I mean, do you see, when I saw Donald Trump meeting with the Chinese Prime Minister, I was thinking possibly maybe something could happen. There could be a deal made. What do you think?
No, look, the Chinese have been, I'll be polite, schizophrenic about this for 25 years. They say, oh, we don't want North Korea to have nuclear weapons, but they have not done one thing that's materially impeded North Korea from achieving that. And we have reporting today in the media that China's been much more supportive of North Korea's ballistic missile program than we had known before, from fragments of a missile that went down in the East China Sea. So there's a lot of information that shows how connected China has been. And the only way to affect that, really, is to convince them that a reunited Korea will not have American troops on the Yalu River looking across into China. It happens, we don't want to be on the Yalu River anyway. There's a deal here, but we don't have much time. And one of the reasons that we're, I think, so pressed now is after 8 years of the Obama policy of strategic patience, which is really a synonym for doing nothing, North Korea's capabilities worldwide are much greater. And let me just add one other point. When North Korea gets the capability to drop an ICBM with a nuclear warhead on the United States, Iran will have it the next day for the right price.
It seems that every president inherits the crazy ant in the attic, which is North Korea. Could Trump actually try a different approach? I mean, is it possible that we can finally deal with the ant and have her committed?
Well, you know, your suggestion was that Dennis Rodman go to North Korea. Maybe I should go with Dennis. Let's see what we can work out here. I mean, honestly, think about this regime. It's the world's only hereditary communist dictatorship. 25 million people in North Korea live in a vast prison camp. In the 1990s, the population began to starve. There was a depopulation of the cities as people left to go to stay with friends and relatives in the countryside where at least there was food, and yet the regime stays in power. They are devoted, obviously, to that. That's why I say this nuclear capability is their ultimate insurance policy. They're not going to give it up because they know if they did, it'd be the end of the regime.
Well, yeah, Ambassador, you bring up a great point. The person that solves this problem actually solves an amazing humanitarian issue. You've got 25 million people in prison. I mean, if a president or someone can solve that problem, I think that's a Nobel Prize. You know what? I think it might be. Don't you think?
Look, there's a famous map of the Korean peninsula at night that shows the lights of the cities of South Korea. You can see the entire southern half of the peninsula. Right. The north is completely dark. It's like it's part of the seas on either side of the Korean peninsula. It is a humanitarian disaster. That's why the only solution here that will work is reuniting the two Koreas peacefully.
All right, Ambassador, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Straight ahead, President Trump's apparent shifts on foreign policy. Will it alienate his base? That debate moments away. In the personal story segment tonight, President Trump's foreign policy, the president giving many people whiplash this week after modifying previous positions on everything from NATO to China, manipulating its currency. But it's President Trump's aggressive stance on military intervention that isn't sitting well with some of his staunchest supporters.
If he puts another foot into Syria, he will never get out, and we will never get out of the Middle East, and it will consume his presidency.
For that region of the world, Assad is one of the better leaders. There are probably only one or two that are better than he. He's not even like a Saddam Hussein murderous thug. He helped us after 9/11, giving us intelligence. It's a very strange thing we've done here, and I feel like it is such a departure from what Trump said on the campaign trail and in 2013 on his Twitter feed.
All right, joining us with reaction from Washington, Stuart Holliday, former ambassador for special political affairs at the UN, And from Oklahoma City, Chris Wilson, former advisor to the Ted Cruz presidential campaign. So, Chris, to you first, is President Trump alienating his base with all of these reversals?
Well, all you have to do is go to the comments section on Breitbart News, and you can see how vast the alienation has begun. I've got a good friend who actually was a leader for the Sanders movement and then moved over and supported Trump, and we had a lot of interesting debates about that, shall we say. But primarily it was because of his positions on foreign policy, and her comment to me earlier today was, when you have Donald Trump taking the same positions as Lindsey Graham and John McCain, then he has completely alienated those of us who got him elected. Now, I find myself in a unique position here where I actually agree with the policy, but am watched in sort of amazement as someone who was against him in the primaries and saw the true illustration of his comments that he could stand on Fifth Avenue and shoot people and not lose supporters. He would not lose supporters. But now, finally, I think they are starting to see that his comments, and the only thing Ann Coulter said that I agree with, is that he said a different thing on the campaign trail than what he is doing today. And whether you agree or disagree with it, the fact is he's doing it and he's losing his base because of it.
Chris, two things you did wrong. One, you read the comments section of a political website. That is, why would you do that? And number two,
what else am I going to do on a Good Friday?
Yeah, a politician changing his mind? Yeah, that's what they do. That's what they're born to do. Stuart, what do you have to say to this? Is Trump going to lose all of his hardcore anti-globalist support because of this?
Well, I don't know. Chris knows a lot more about grassroots politics than I do, but I would say the president also campaigned on restoring American leadership and a strong national defense. The Tomahawk missile strike in Syria is a long way from deploying, 500,000 ground troops on the ground and getting back in a major way. And you got to be able to walk as president and chew gum at the same time. The world doesn't stop. The problems continue, and we have threats out there. And I think a lot of people, conservatives, are going to be looking at, do they have a job? Do they have, is the health care situation going to be resolved? On this stuff, we got to be able to protect our borders and advocate for a very strong military, which I think he did during the campaign.
Yeah, that's a good point, Chris. The fact is, he won by projecting toughness. And, I mean, what he did in Syria and what he just did, it is the same thing. And I worry about a politician who is too stubborn or has an unbending view of everything and he can't evolve.
Well, no, I completely agree with you, and I agree with what Stuart said too. Is what he's doing in terms of projecting strength is very different than what we may have seen in the past. But the fact is what he promised was an America First policy, in which he would, if there was spending on the military, it would be to protect us at home. And frankly, I think most people thought the spending on the military would be devoted toward protecting the borders and reinforcing the wall, standing on the other side of the wall. And so I think we've got to separate out here what he's doing and whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing, and how his base is reacting to it. That to me is the unique situation he finds himself in, is he really did not allow himself, because of the rhetoric on the campaign, because of his past statements, didn't allow him the room to grow, as Stuart said that he is now growing. And so because of that, he is having this backlash with a very good portion of his base, and not just on foreign policy, also his treatment of Steve Bannon, his elevation of Jared Kushner, and literally bringing him closer in, that you're seeing an eruption take place that I think puts him in jeopardy for the first time since he announced his candidacy and really began to take these positions, that puts him in a very difficult situation with those people who stood by him no matter what happened. Access Hollywood, comments about John McCain, everything he did throughout the campaign, they stayed by him. This is the one thing that could drive a wedge there.
But here's the difference. He's now president. A lot of time, I mean, once your guy gets in, you're just happy he won, right, Stuart? It's like, you know what? As long as he sticks to the wall, he doesn't sacrifice the wall, I'm okay with him. And this other stuff. Right. I think we might be confusing Ann Coulter and Pat Buchanan and the comment section of Breitbart with America.
Exactly.
It's the people that speak the most.
Exactly. And I was actually going to make that point, which is, you have these very, loud, noticeable voices in that movement that get a lot of attention. And I think the press, frankly, likes to stir this up a little bit, too, to sort of say, look here, your core supporters are questioning your commitment to what you said in the campaign. But I bet you if you polled all those working-class people out there in the field, the people that crossed over the lines, the Scoop Jackson Democrats who voted for him, I mean, these people care about their jobs, and they care about a strong national defense and restoring American leadership. And so I would be interested to see the difference between what they say and what these other media outlets are saying.
Yeah, I think the good news is that when you elect a deal maker that operates on flexibility, you're going to get a deal maker that operates on flexibility. One day he'll be a globalist, the next day he'll be a protectionist. That's just the way Trump is. Gentlemen, thank you. Coming up next, how the United Airlines controversy will impact you the next time you step foot on a plane. Don't go away.
Assignment, and you're sitting in your seat.
Yeah.
This goes back to the days of Ralph Nader when he got bumped in 1975 from an Allegheny plane, and he sued, and that led to all the rules that are in place now called denied boarding compensation. So you're sitting in your seat, they go, we're looking for volunteers, emphasis on the word volunteer, to give up their seat in return for a cash voucher, usually a limited amount to begin with, and the promise to get you to your destination within a certain amount of hours.
Right.
Now, if nobody gets up and volunteers, the value of that voucher goes up. It's an auction.
Understandably, yeah.
Law, supply, and demand. So I was on a plane once. It went from 300 to 400 to 500. I didn't get up. Nobody got up. Went to 800, 900. Got to $1,500. I said, you know what? I'm going to do. I got trampled because everybody got up.
Yeah.
So what you saw here in Chicago is they stopped at 850.
Yeah.
And
they were cheap, and now they're paying through the nose. Just because they wanted to save a few $100, that guy's going to own the Dow's going to own the airlines.
Well, here's what's going to look. United Airlines does not want this case to go to court.
Yeah.
They're going to write a check to settle this as fast as they possibly can.
Yeah. I love the lawyer. I don't have his name in front of me. Thomas Demetrio. I do have his name in front of me. That when they asked him if racism played a role, and he just dismissed it, and I thought, that is refreshing to me.
Yeah.
He could have used that card if he wanted to, and he said no.
But you don't have to use that card in this case.
Yeah.
Because the airlines use these sophisticated algorithms to figure out who they're going to pull off if they want.
Right.
And it's really based on who paid the least amount for their ticket. Now, I'm a mega million miler. I'm the least likely guy to get pulled off, even though they've tried.
Right.
But here's the deal. If you don't get up, the only way they can pull you out of that seat is if you are drunk, on drugs,
been there.
Offensive bodily odor. Have you been there?
Yeah, no. 2 out of 3. 2 out of 3.
I'll be the judge of that.
Yes,
I'm sitting pretty close to you.
Yeah.
And if you are actually a fugitive from justice. Now we've done it, okay?
Yes.
He was none of those. And therefore, they violated everything.
I always worry, too, because so many people are medicated now on airlines that, if you just wake somebody up, they're disoriented, they act differently. That could have been a problem. I don't know with this particular fellow.
No, that wasn't the case at all here, and you have all these eyewitnesses to see it.
Right.
However, if they hadn't shot the video, if the passengers hadn't shot that video, we would never have known that story, and he would have been in jail for violating a federal law of disobeying a flight attendant.
It's all about the cell phones.
It is.
It's not just about law enforcement. It's about now everything is captured.
Yes.
When you do your job, no matter where you are, that cell phone can change your life.
And part of job training in the service arena has to be you are being watched.
This is not my idea. Scott Adams had mentioned this, that watching the tape of the people that were outraged, they still didn't get up and off of their seat. And so they got reimbursed, or they got offered reimbursement, but a lot of people were screaming, oh my God, this is terrible, but they weren't getting up.
Well, you know what? Because they were asking for volunteers.
Yes.
Come on.
Yes.
It's not like the military where you will volunteer.
Yeah.
They're asking. And that's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
But remember, that $1,350 max is not the max. About an hour ago, Delta Airlines has now emphasized that they're going to allow their own employees to go up to $10,000.
Wow.
You know why? It's not how much it costs. It's how much it's worth.
I might just fly just to get bumped.
We're going to haul your you-know-what off the plane. That's
Exactly. I get to stay free in some hotel room, order room service, sit in my boxers, watch bad movies. All right, Peter, enough about me. Up next, Kansas announces its first conviction for voter fraud by a non-U.S. citizen. How many more prosecutions are ahead to punish illegal voting? The Factor's coming right back.
Live from America's News headquarters, I'm Trace Gallagher. An Arkansas judge is now blocking the state from using a lethal injection drug in its upcoming executions of 6 men. Actor Johnny Depp joining protests of the planned executions, which are to start Monday night. The state was rushing them because its supply of a sedative used in the protocol is due to expire by the end of April. Arkansas has not executed an inmate since 2005 because of drug shortages and legal challenges. The former sheriff in Maricopa County, Arizona, is looking to add some star power to his upcoming criminal contempt of court trial. Joe Arpaio is asking for the country's top cop, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, to testify. The controversial sheriff was known for his hardline immigration policies. He faces a misdemeanor contempt charge for letting immigration patrols continue despite a judge's order to stop them. Arpaio's attorney tells Fox News his office has not been in contact with Jeff Sessions and is making the request through court documents. It is unknown if Sessions will actually appear. Vice President Mike Pence travels to South Korea tomorrow. It is part of a scheduled trip, which is his first official visit to the Asia-Pacific region. The trip comes as tensions rise over concerns of North Korea conducting another missile test. Pence will also visit Japan, Indonesia, Australia, and Hawaii. I'm Trace Gallagher. Now back to The Factor.
The O'Reilly Factor, the #1 cable news show for 16 years and counting.
Thanks for staying with us for this O'Reilly Factor special. I'm Greg Gutfeld in for Bill O'Reilly. And in the Factor follow-up segment tonight, voter fraud in Kansas this week. Victor David Garcia Bebic, a Peruvian national, pled guilty to illegally voting 3 times. He did it in a 2012 special election, plus the general elections of 2012 and 2014. It was Kansas's first conviction of a non-citizen voter fraud since giving authority to its Secretary of State to prosecute the crime. Joining us now with more from Topeka, the Secretary of State of Kansas, Chris Kopak, who oversaw the prosecution of this case. So, Mr. Kopak, it's your first conviction of a non-citizen voter fraud. How big a problem is this? Is this like the tip of the iceberg, or is it just a tip?
It is the tip of the iceberg. You know, Greg, these cases are really hard to discover, and so the cases that get prosecuted are just a tiny percentage of the total size of the problem. Look, take this guy's case, for example. The way we discovered this was he registered to vote back in 2011. We didn't know that he was an alien at the time. And then in 2017, he naturalized, and at the naturalization ceremony, a nice person from the Sedgwick County Election Office said, "Hey, would you like to register to vote?" And he filled out another registration card. They went back to the office, typed in his information, and said, "Hey, this guy's been registered for almost 6 years, and he's been voting." And so we wouldn't have discovered it unless he had registered that second time. And then, of course, we brought the prosecution. But in that same county, we know of 24 other individuals who either registered as aliens or attempted to. But we didn't discover it in time before the statute of limitations ran, so we can't prosecute them. And those are just the ones we found. We're talking about many times that number we haven't found.
Is this more like a symbolic prosecution, like when they used to go after people for pirating music? You know, they find some woman who lifted 10 Pearl Jam songs, and they, to give a message to everybody else?
No, it's really not. You know, this is if we have more cases of non-citizens voting where we actually discover it within 5 years of the crime, right, then we will prosecute them. And that's the strange thing about this particular crime. There's some kinds of voter fraud we can discover pretty easily, like when someone votes in 2 different states. We can compare databases and figure that out. But when non-citizens voting, you can't look at the voter rolls of your state and say, oh yeah, there's a citizen, that's a non-citizen. There's nothing in the record that says that. So we only find out when something unusual happens, like the guy registers a second time after naturalizing. Or another example, maybe somebody says on a jury form, oh, I don't want to serve on that jury, I'm a non-citizen. And then we get a clue that way. So it's really hard to get these cases in time to prosecute them.
Now, the Republican chairman of the U.S. Election Assistance Commission says there's no epidemic of voter fraud. You disagree. What are you seeing that he doesn't see?
Well, what I see is in what we're looking at in Kansas, where we are going after certain forms of voter fraud, you can get a sense of the size of the problem. And we're in litigation right now against the ACLU. They want us to stop requiring people to provide proof of citizenship, which is a reform we introduced in 2013. So we had an outside expert come in and do some sampling of our voter rolls. And he estimates that the total number of non-citizens, aliens on our voter rolls, is in the thousands, maybe as high as 18,000. So it's a big problem, and we literally only see that very, very tip of the iceberg, and sometimes we can prosecute.
You know, the sentence, what do you think of the guy, the sentence, I think he got non-supervised probation, and he had to pay a fine of $5,000. What do you think of that kind of sentencing?
I think that's appropriate because I wanted, when we gained this prosecutorial authority, I want it to be a heavy fine, not like $200, but $5,000, so that people will think twice when they say, hey, look, if you get caught committing voter fraud in Kansas, there's going to be a heavy fine. I don't think people necessarily need to spend time in jail.
Yeah.
But it's got to hit them pretty hard in the pocketbook.
I would hate to go to jail for that. If somebody comes up to you and says, what are you in for? It's like the guy next to you is kidnapping and assault, and you're like, I voted illegally in a local election, and it's like, steer clear of this guy. He's trouble. All right.
It could be rough.
Yeah. Secretary Kobach, thank you so much. And a quick reminder, two of Bill's books are currently on the New York Times bestseller list. I hate him. Old School, Life in the Sane Lane is #1. And Killing the Rising Sun is #3. You can get either one for free if you sign up to become a BillO'Reilly.com premium member. So directly ahead, military and foreign policy developments sending shockwaves across the globe. How will it all shake out? Next. In the Back of the Book segment tonight, it's been an enormous news week, with foreign policy and military affairs dominating the headlines. Joining us now to help us put this all in perspective from Washington, Fox News Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge, along with Fox News National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin. So, Jennifer, I wanted to know what you thought was the top story of the week, and you bring us to, obviously, the big bomb and also this report, erroneous it might be, about a preemptive strike against North Korea. Elaborate on both, if you will.
Well, Greg, first of all, I can report based on multiple sources here in the Pentagon and at other government agencies that NBC report about a preemptive strike being planned by the U.S. military in the event that they see signs that Kim Jong-un in North Korea is planning a nuclear test. That report, that NBC report, is false. And so I would say that that's probably one of the most important developments this week, in the sense that things are so tense on the Korean Peninsula that there's a lot of concern here at the Pentagon that Kim Jong-un might misread either some of these news reports or even some of the U.S. military actions in the last week, some of which really, I'm being told, were not designed to send any sort of message to him. So if you're talking about the bomb that was used in Afghanistan, again, we're told that was a decision by a local commander, the top U.S. commander in Afghanistan, and it was not designed to send any sort of strategic message to anyone.
Okay. Can they use those bombs outside Afghanistan? I mean, is it...
Well, they certainly could. There are some in the Air Force arsenal, of course. But it has been deployed to Afghanistan for use there. I don't believe it's been deployed elsewhere.
All right. Catherine, your biggest story is our CIA director slamming WikiLeaks like a screen door in a hurricane. Why did he speak out so strongly now?
Well, look, it's not every day the CIA director publicly drops the hammer on the head of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange. And of all of the threats that they're facing in the intelligence community right now, CIA Director Mike Pompeo said he chose this one because it's part of an emerging threat stream that they're seeing. And to be very simplistic and break it down for folks at home, you're seeing these relatively small entities like WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, the former NSA contractor Edward Snowden, and they're partnering with traditional enemies of the United States, in this case Russia, and it's able to amplify the damage. And this is part of something that military intelligence calls the gray zone. This is the battle space between peace and conventional warfare, and it's where a lot of guys like Russia go to play because they cannot compete with the U.S. in terms of military strength. They don't have the economic strength, so they play in this gray zone with information warfare and propaganda to amplify their message and to further damage the United States.
What do you think this aggressive stance is going to entail?
You know, I found it very interesting that he left that threat hanging out there. My belief, it's not based on independent data that I have, but my belief is that there is going to be payback for WikiLeaks and Assange in particular, and it will not come in an obvious way. It probably would come through the very cyber tools that his organization says they recently exposed in that Vault 7 on the web.
I have a theory about the Trump presidency, is that we get a month of news in 1 week. It's like, you know, when you go outlet shopping and you always come home with bags and boxes when you just wanted a shirt from J. Crew. It's like every day you're overloaded with so much stuff. I thought the biggest story was the Easter egg roll scandal. The fact that the media is so upset about this, and apparently the egg manufacturer has a deadline to get these eggs, and it hasn't been met. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe Donald Trump is trying to get a better deal on wooden eggs.
Well, it would be something if the Easter egg guy was really a Russian intelligence operative who had infiltrated the network that effectively.
That sounds like a case that could be cracked by a hard-boiled journalist. We do need a break. All right.
Okay.
Stay with us, Catherine and Jennifer. We're going to take a short break, and when we return, we got the No Spin preview of the big stories brewing for next week.